Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Let's Talk Aging. My name is Molly Wisniewski of the Upside to Aging, and today I'm with Rick O. Weijo to talk about his book, Remember Me, and his project on creating a legacy. So Rick, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course, yes, I love your project, and I think it's something that a lot of people are going to be excited to learn about and try themselves. But with that, can you tell us about your project and the mission behind your project?
Actually, I started my project probably about 5 years ago, and it is a book. I mean, basically, the project is the book, and promoting the book itself. But the title is "Remember Me: Creating and Leaving an Inspiring and Memorable Legacy." And think of the book as a workbook. It's a variety of work sheets inside. I have, even on my website, I have some free, the worksheets. But basically, think of it as a way to. I'm thinking about my legacy. I've never really thought much about it. I don't really understand it. What can I do? Where can I go with this? And that was the intent. And if I were to say a mission statement, I'm a baby boomer. There's 76 million baby boomers in the United States. There's about 9 or 10, worked with some folks in Canada, and there's about 9 or 10 million Canadians, baby boomers as well. So we are a force, and I'm guessing that most of that force has never thought of the word legacy, or even, is maybe a little bit frightened by it. So I guess my hope would be that with the book, that at least some, or as many as possible, will take up the challenge of can I create a legacy for myself and my family, and engage. So that's really the goal. That's the mission.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And I love that you bring up the baby boomers because, there's a lot of talk about you guys.
Yeah.
So,
we're all getting older.
Right. So is this your field? How did you get into this? Was this something?
Absolutely not my field at all. Nothing at all. My background my academic PhD in marketing and business, and actually was a college professor for a while, then went into the national labs for Department of Energy, and actually spent the last 25 years of my career in industry, working in utilities and marketing and product development stuff. So it has nothing to do with it. What triggered my interest was really a number of factors, and maybe this is true for everyone, but I decided that I was going to retire. So that's always a big advance if you're thinking of retirement. Within a few months of my retirement, I had my wife and I had the birth of our granddaughter. Will be our only granddaughter, so that's a really special event, and I think that triggers the idea of what can you do for your grandchildren. Within 2 weeks of my retirement, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Wow.
And I spent several months. As it turned out, it was fine. I was treated appropriately and everything. But the whole fear of cancer and what's going to happen, and that really was quite engaging. And then finally, I'll give you a funny story. Well, a story. But in retirement, you have all these tasks you never do, and one of the tasks, I had drawers full of stuff, and so it's time to start clearing it out. And I was going through some drawers, and I found some old coins, and they, saying, oh, maybe I'll just sell them on eBay or just get rid of them. Really, I just want to get rid of the stuff. And I started looking at them, and I realized those coins were from my father, and he was in World War II. And he was in Pacific Theater during World War II, and so a lot of the coins were British and Australian. One of the coins was not very good shape, but it was a 150-year-old coin. And I looked at it and said, I'm actually considering selling this. And I realized those are my memories of my father. He didn't leave anything. He really didn't write much. He And so I realized those are the nuggets of my memories. And so what I did is actually ended up taking the coins and came up with a coin, sort of a notebook, and I list the coin and the history behind the coin.
Wow,
So
that's
it's a way to share, the coins became part of a legacy, of a symbolically way to share some memories about different people.
definitely.
So, I was going to, what I'd say, hawk the family jewels, if you think of it that way. And the reality is that, why would I do this? And I think all of those events came together and said, I haven't done anything and I don't know how to do it. And so I wrote the book. It sort of was a process for me to figure out what to do for me.
Yeah,
And so the book is, and it is intentionally a workbook because it's a way that I was able to put together a legacy or create a legacy. And so it's a way to share, here's how I did it.
yeah.
It's really the approach. But my background was not in any way
But but I,
forward.
I think that I love that. I think that makes the story so much better. You spend your whole life doing one thing, but then you realize, uh, plus that there's so much hype in retirement, right? Like,
Right.
uh, there's the world's your oyster.
Right.
But then you actually have to sit down and think about it and you mold it into what you want it to be. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I, I love that. I love that. Very metaphorical, the coins become.
That's
In,
right.
yeah, in that
Very
story.
important to me, very surprisingly. And I think for other people, they may find, maybe it was for me, coins, but for other people and in their families, they have their own metaphors. And I'll give one example. One person, a friend of mine, his family painted
Mm,
histories of family paintings. So for them, the story behind each of the paintings is, the equivalent of the metaphor for me on coins. So
right.
it differs for everyone.
Yeah. No. I love that. Um, so can you elaborate on the legacy aspect of it? Because legacy is it's a big word, and what does that mean for you personally, right, through this journey of writing your book, and um, uh, why do you feel it's important?
Well, yeah, let me, legacy in many ways, I think is a scary word. It's a
Mhm.
terrifying word for a lot of people because legacy means, oh man, I must be getting old. And, I have to start, I have to actually think of what a legacy is. And, I think the natural tendency is if you think legacy, I think I'll put that off. Maybe I can put it off till later, and so it's not something I want to avoid. I don't want to think about my death or, I'm just not ready for that. So what I thought is, let me give you a better, I think, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I know some people who've struggled with this as well. Legacy, I keep it as simple as possible
Mm,
and as positive as possible. To me, a legacy, all it is a gift from one generation to the next. Nothing more, nothing less. So it's a gift. So you're giving, and think of it as you're giving that gift forward to somebody.
mhm.
And don't think of it as anything more. And that gift could be money, it could be property, it can be jewelry, it can be stories, it can
Yeah.
be family trees, it can be a variety of different things, but just think of it as a gift. In my analogy, and I'm going to use it a couple times, um, to me, the best way to think of legacy is, and everyone gets excited around Christmas. I remember being a kid, and maybe your relatives came and they had a box with them, and that box was just packed full of gifts.
Yeah.
And so exciting as a child to see, wow, look at those great gifts. And I think in many ways, if we now think of legacy in that same way, we have this wonderful opportunity, this box, and it's gifts, and we're going to put gifts in that box, and we're going to wrap them, and we're going to present them, make them look nice, and they're going to state, they're going to say who is it to and why it's so important. But it's going to be a beautiful box of gifts, and it's gifts I'm giving to these children, to the Gen X's, to to future generations. Could be to my children or grandchildren or friends or whatever. But they're beautiful gifts that I want to give and present, and I want to make sure they understood the reason for those gifts, and to think of it that way in a very positive light. Wow, I have my box, and I'll give the analogy. 5 years ago, that box was pretty empty, and there wasn't much in it. If I opened and looked into that box, maybe there was a few file folders on the bottom with some notes, and man, they looked so ugly, and maybe there was some coins tossed in the bottom, but nobody knew what they were, and they probably would have thrown them away or given them away because they didn't mean anything. So now I want to take and pull that stuff out. I want to present it in a way that people understand. Wow, okay, I get it.
Right.
What the value of this is, but it's just a box of gifts. I mean, my analogy is think of it as a box of gifts, and don't think of it any different way. Think of it as a beautiful box of gifts.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. It reminds me, I was thinking of your project the other day because an advertisement popped up for Ancestry.com, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I started, you kind of get wrapped up into the whole ride of who are your ancestors, where did you come from, and what I came up with were a whole bunch of papers that it was nice. One of them was a census, and it was nice to see my grandmother's name on it, but I didn't know the story behind it. And I thought of your project because it feels like a more personable experience. Like, we all want to know where we've come from, but you're actually, like you said, you're giving that gift to people, and in a much more personal way, and you get, I don't know, you have some control over the conversation as well.
Right.
In what they're what your story actually is.
Right. An interesting analogy in Ancestry is, if you, a lot of people, and I really like Ancestry.com. I mean, it's
Yeah.
incredibly valuable in terms of all the leads. But every now and then, and particularly on my wife's side, I've seen where some of the relatives, usually you're going along and there's no stories or no pictures. It's sort of hard to, it's sort of the rough, raw family tree.
Right.
But in some cases, some of the family members on my mom or my wife's side actually have wonderful stories that were about, like, from the 1850s. And they have some newspaper articles and some other bits of information that tell a lot about the family. And, the way I would say is, if you don't really work on developing a legacy, it's just like that blank story, there's nothing there. Whereas if you help, and I think Ancestry is a great place to put this history and stories and stuff in, but to write it in and say, wow, I didn't know that, and my wife didn't know that. And it's just a very fascinating part of her history that she didn't know. So it's a way to build it, and you're helping that process. So it's valuable.
Yeah, definitely. It really is. With that, do you think that this is something that anyone can do? I mean, you found it at a particular fork, right, in your life.
Right.
Is this something that anybody can just pick up and start creating their legacy, or do you think that there's, I don't know.
Actually, I think so, and I think there's maybe a false belief, and only people with money and wealth and property, can leave legacies, and I think that's the falsehood. And a lot of people don't have that wealth and money and property that they can give and gift. And maybe the simpler thing to think of is, there's memorabilia like the jewelry and stuff, and the watches and the special things from each family, and maybe let's not think about the wealth. Let's think of the symbolic, the jewelry and those special things, the paintings, the notebooks full of information and stuff. Those are just as valuable. And I think the other intimidating thing for a lot of people is that they're afraid of writing. and
Mm.
I wanted to give a story. I mean, my mom was not, a great writer, but when she had died, I went through and found some information. And what was interesting, I just found some little notebooks and things from, 40, 50 years ago. And they're just tiny little notebooks. And she would write things in there. She'd write recipes, and she'd write poetry, and she would write, a little bit about some relative who visited, and when and who was there, and little stories and things. And, I'm sure she was just jotting things down and didn't think of it. But that is so valuable. I mean, people don't realize that little recipe that's written in the corner, or that little story, or little teasing story, maybe they were kidding around, or a letter they tuck in, has having valuable. I mean, to me, it's incredibly valuable just to have those few words, those few stories, that little bit of information. And so I think if people would realize that all it is the cost of a notebook. Go to Office Depot and spend a couple dollars, spend a few more dollars on a notebook, and then write in the front of that notebook when you're starting it and what you're trying to do, and just start writing. And I don't think people realize it. And maybe the best thing is, if your parents had left you, would you have appreciated it? And I'd say yes. I mean, I think if they think of it that way and say, oh, I can't do that, well, anything that you can do would be
Right.
so valuable. So even that one notebook. And I think of what's popular now is legacy letters.
Mm.
And legacy letter is sort of a letter from one generation, could be from one a parent to the children, or one individual to another, and it's just a handwritten, 1 or 2 page note. And you can get books to, help on legacy letters, and even a 1 page letter draft of what your thoughts are would be so incredibly valuable. So
Yeah.
anyone can do it, but they have to. I think that there is a fear of writing, and you have to at least just be willing to say, just write, you
Yeah.
know, and accept that. And um, I think even assembling some of, simple heirlooms, and again, think of it as your little box.
Mm.
You can
Mhm.
have them in drawers tucked in the back, and you can't have, to the extent that you can pull that information out and leave some meaningful notes as to, this was from here, and I want to give it to this person. All those simple things are so valuable. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think everyone can leave a legacy.
No, I love that. Yeah. And it sounds so empowering
Hmm.
that way. Really gives an opportunity for us to stop and appreciate us, ourselves, and the lives that we are living.
Right.
Maybe it's a good note that we should be taking that anyway, because many of us are so busy, we just kind of forget about it. So,
Right. Right.
no, I love that. Oh, so what type of responses are you receiving from your book, and then maybe the project itself?
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about it more in general. I mean, I get positive comments, if I get a review on the book. But I think the issue, I've worked with some people on legacy things, and I think I'm going to say, are people open? You have the question: are people open to the idea? Yes or no? And I'd say, unfortunately, I think there's a lot of no's still today. Meaning, I'm afraid of it, and I think that whole notion of legacy, um, I don't understand what that word means. I'm not sure I want to open that Pandora's box right now. It's
Right.
easy for me to keep that lid on and tuck it in the corner. And one of these days I'll open that box. But unfortunately, I think too often people never do,
Hmm.
or do it too late, where there isn't as much value out of it. I will say, in Portland right now, I've been involved with an organization called SAGE, and it's an organization called Senior Advocates for Generational Equity. And it's a relatively new organization, about 5 years old.
Hmm.
And it's groups of people who actually are interested in what kinds of gifts do we give to the next generation. And I think one of the fears is that so far in our American culture, there's always been a progression, and the newest generation always had a better quality of life than the future prior generations. And I think there's a fear now that that may not be true in the future. That are we doing? And I guess the challenge is, are we doing enough to help the next generations? And the whole concept, I think the question legacy was, why is it important? And I think that's the whole point, is not just on an individual, but on a societal level too. Are we doing enough to help the next generation? And it's an organization that's trying to work through that and see if there's things that can be done. But I think this whole notion, I think every generation, the new generation's society gets more and more complex. It gets more and more difficult. It's not as easy. I think every generation needs our support from the prior generation. We need that. They need that help. They need that step up. They need that assistance, because I want to see the next generation have a quality of life that's as good as ours.
Right.
And as more positive that we're developing. And that's the whole point of legacy to me, is to the extent that we can provide more to that future generations.
Yeah, no, I love that. And this gives it a really great, especially when you put it that way, on a societal level too. And coming from a baby boomer who, I think as big as the baby boomers are, it's a generation that we owe a lot to in terms of where we are today as a society. And you kind of built that foundation for, politically social movements, freedom, really embracing the freedom of speech and kind of using it in a critical way. And then to have this as a tool to kind of further that. I don't know.
Yeah, I would hope it helped. That's, to me, it's, I hope it, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's something that I think, well, I hear you when you say that people are still a bit hesitant and actually not really, maybe still not very comfortable with engaging in a project like this. But it does at the same time seem like a very tangible and easy way to leave a legacy.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be this big thing.
Right. And I have some ideas of things to suggest.
Oh, good.
Or people are thinking this on. I think at the end of the day, classic, don't put it off. I mean, it has to be the advice. You just have to, I think by taking maybe a negative view and saying it's gifts, it's these beautiful gifts that you're trying to put together. Don't make it any more than that. Maybe that will help. That avoidance behavior of, I don't want to open this Pandora's box. If you think of, let's open a box and fill it full of gifts. That's a better way of doing it. And on the other side, saying if your box is there, your legacy box, and that's what I'm going to say, the concept of it's a legacy box. Your legacy box is always going to be there. You can choose to put things in it or not. Now you've thrown a few notebooks in and file folders with the word will on it, and some trinkets are in there and nobody knows what they are. That's what it looks like now. Wouldn't you prefer it to be a beautiful box of gifts that are very meaningful? So somehow don't put it off. I think the second thing I wanted to recommend is, and many people probably have an interest in legacy when they hit, and I'll use the example of 50s or early 60s or something. Well, one of my great mistakes was I started thinking about this when I turned in, I was in my 60s. And well, that means my parents were already deceased. You have aunts and uncles. And in your case, it may well be if you're, 60, well, you still may have aunts and uncles that are in their, late 70s or 80s. Or first thing to do is, everyone now has a smartphone. And for 99 cents, you can buy a recording app. For $1.99 or 99 cents, so you don't even get any commercials on it anymore. So practice a couple of times and go visit your relatives, visit your parents, visit your mom and dad, visit your uncles and aunts, all of them. and have 2, 3, 4 questions for them. Simple questions. Just sit back because they've done the same thing. They've done the same thing. They're afraid of the concept, and just pull out your smartphone and turn on your recorder and ask them a couple, 2, 3 simple questions. Let it go. And the interesting thing, record as much as you can. And what you could do is you've got the most valuable information for your future to help you with your future generation or your future legacy, because you've started getting some valuable insights from the past. And you don't even have to do anything. You've got it recorded. You could pull it up 5 years from now. The important thing is you got it recorded. If you don't do it, you will be in the same situation I am, which is to have nothing.
Right. Oh,
So
wow.
the simplest thing is just record the information. Third thing is you don't have to do everything, and one of my goals in the book was to get people to think, what's important to you? What are either from tips you get from the past, your prior generations may have some insights from your own life, what's been important to you,
Mm-hmm.
and then thinking forward, what insights do you want to share in the future? Well, you can come up with lots of tasks, many, many, many tasks. But I'd say just pick a few, prioritize. Don't think of 10 tasks. Think of it as, are there a couple things that are really important to me? I'll give an example. Even and I'll just give an example. Education for me is very, very important. And I was the first person in my immediate family to go to college. I got a little carried away, got a PhD, but okay. But education is important. So what I wanted to do is make sure my daughter had a college education. I want to make sure my granddaughter has a college education. So 529. Well, I can do whatever I can. I want to encourage that education thing. So that could be one thing I can do. Pick a couple things. Don't make it a big deal. Try to pick just a couple things that are really important. When you get done with those and you put them in your legacy box, even if it's symbolically putting it in that box, then you can think of the next few things. So don't try to do everything, just do a few. And my final suggestion is change your perspective. Change your perspective from that dreaded legacy end of life. Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to run as fast as I can to hide from this concept. To the analogy of that beautiful box, that legacy box, and that wonderful box of gifts that you want to give to the future. And they're so elegantly packaged, and they have the right name on them, and they have a beautiful little note so everyone understands that, oh, I know I'm going to get this, and I understand why I'm getting why it's so important. But that beautiful box, maybe when you fill one box, you can add another box symbolically. But those beautiful boxes are there. And my analogy is you're walking through those final doors. As you're walking, you turn and you give those gifts to the future generation.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful legacy gifts.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. That's beautiful. I think at the end, that's exactly what you would hope for. That's,
Yes.
So, wow, thank you for that. I think that's sage advice. And it makes it a lot more approachable.
Yeah, I think make it approachable, make it fun, make it a beautiful experience.
Yeah, definitely. Now your book, Remember Me, is you use your story as an example, correct, to help others in there. So I'll be linking to where people can have access to your book, but you also provide free PDFs for
The worksheets.
the worksheet. Yes.
Yeah, actually, there's worksheets that are embedded in the book, and if it's
Right.
on Amazon Kindle, they're digitally, and they'd be hard to deal with. So, if you have the book, you can just write in the book. But a lot of people now do prefer Kindle, and so what you can do is just go to the website, which is my last name, full name, richardowejo.com, and basically on one of the pages you can click on it and
Yeah.
upload and just print out the worksheets. You don't really even need the book. Just it gives some ways to help you go through the process.
Yeah.
And I will say everyone will go through the process slightly different. This is one way, and you'll probably tweak it a little bit, for what makes sense for you. But take advantage of those forms. They're free. You can just go
Yeah.
get them, use them,
Definitely.
create your beautiful gifts.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, I think that is how you know it's a wonderful project, because not only did you find that it benefited yourself, but you chose to share it with others. And when I caught wind of your project, I was so excited, because I think I was looking for something similar, but I couldn't find it out there. So you know, so I'm definitely going to be using it, and I just thought that it needed to be shared, at least on my end. So
Okay.
yeah,
Please tell them to take advantage of it. Please take advantage of it.
definitely. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I think um, what your project is doing and your book is doing is really, um, it's taking us stand so other people can see it. I think other people are starting to catch up on this, and they want to explore these types of conversations, but they don't know how, as you've said. Um, so I really appreciate you offering us an example of how to do it so beautifully, and that will benefit the family as a whole
Yeah,
for generations to come.
that's right. And thank you very much for inviting me.